A coat on fire. A shoe cut apart before it hits the bin. A watch worth more than most houses, destroyed on purpose. A price that goes up, and people want it more. And it's still happening. This is why. You've stood in a shop and watched something you wanted finally go on sale. This coat never got that chance. That coat was worth £2,000. Burberry set it on fire instead of selling it for £1,000. In 2018 alone, they destroyed £28.6 million in stock this way. Enough for 20,000 trench coats. Not sold, not donated, burned. On paper, that makes no sense. Burning stock costs a brand more than selling it ever would. So why take it? Because luxury brands aren't really selling clothes. They're selling scarcity. Economists have a name for this, the Veblen effect, where a higher price makes something more desirable, not less, because the price itself is part of what you're buying. The moment a coat like this shows up in a discount outlet at a third of the price, that effect breaks. Every customer who paid full price that season effectively got overcharged, and every future customer knows the coat might turn up cheap eventually, so why pay full price at all? There's a second problem hiding behind the first one. Unsold luxury stock doesn't just risk being sold cheap, it risks being sold at all outside the brand's control. Once product leaves official channels, it can end up in the gray market, resold alongside counterfeits, with no way for the brand to guarantee what you're actually buying. Burning the stock isn't only about protecting the price, it's about making sure the product simply stops existing, so nobody has to ask where it came from. It's the same instinct that keeps Rolex waiting lists years long instead of raising prices to clear demand. Scarcity through a queue, or scarcity through a fire. Different method, same economic logic. Compare that to a normal high street shop. When a jumper doesn't sell, it gets marked down, moved to a clearance rack, and eventually sold for a fraction of its price. Nobody in mainstream retail burns their own stock, because mainstream retail was never selling the price itself as part of the product. Burberry's own explanation was different to the one economists give. The company said the destruction wasn't about status or scarcity at all. It was about counterfeiting. If unsold stock leaked into secondary markets, it could be copied, relabeled, or sold alongside fakes, with no way to tell a real coat from a knockoff. Burning it, the company said, was brand protection in the most literal sense, not exclusivity, security. Industry analysts were skeptical. Destroying stock to prevent counterfeiting doesn't explain why the practice was so consistent year after year, long before counterfeiting was ever mentioned publicly. Brand strategists pointed to the simpler explanation instead. Protecting exclusivity is worth more to a luxury house than the stock itself, counterfeit risk or not. Richemont gave a similar reason for its own destroyed watches, protecting intellectual property and brand integrity. The justification traveled from company to company, almost word for word. Burberry was not making this up as it went. And Burberry was not alone. In 2017, a New York Times investigation found Nike was slashing unsold shoes and clothing with blades before throwing them in the bins outside its own stores, specifically to stop anyone reselling them. Around the same time, Richemont, the parent company behind Cartier, was revealed to have destroyed more than $494 million worth of unsold watches over several years, rather than let them reach the market at a discount. Louis Vuitton, Coach, and Michael Kors have all been linked to the same practice. So have Chanel, Victoria's Secret, Urban Outfitters, and Walmart, according to separate reporting. Louis Vuitton takes it even further. The brand doesn't run public discount sales at all. A product is sold at full price, or it's discontinued and pulled from the market completely, so no customer anywhere ever sees a Louis Vuitton item marked down. This wasn't confined to one country either. Nike is American. Richemont is Swiss. Burberry is British. The practice crossed borders long before regulators did. This wasn't one brand's decision. It was an entire industry's unspoken standard, and Burberry was simply the one whose numbers became public first. And this isn't a Burberry-sized problem. The fashion industry as a whole produces around 92 million tons of waste every year. In the United States alone, more than 16 million tons of textile waste is generated annually, and about 65% of it ends up in landfill. The industry is responsible for roughly 10% of global carbon emissions, more than international flights and maritime shipping combined. Destroyed stock isn't just wasted money, it's manufactured, shipped, and then burned, tripling the environmental cost of a product nobody ever wore. Industry estimates suggest the equivalent of one garbage truck full of textiles is burned or buried somewhere in the world every single second. None of those figures include what happens after a garment leaves the shop either, the second wave of waste created when a customer throws it away, which most estimates don't even count. Burberry's 28.6 million pounds wasn't an outlier. It was one visible receipt in an industry that throws away enormous volumes of product as a matter of routine. And here's what almost nobody realized. In some countries, destroying the stock wasn't just protecting the brand. It was also the cheaper option on the balance sheet. Destroyed inventory can be written off as a loss. In the United States, if goods are destroyed under customs supervision instead of sold, a company can recover up to 99% of the import duties and taxes it already paid on them. In Italy, tax rules have allowed firms to itemize destroyed stock for further deductions. This isn't a fringe loophole either. It's a formally recognized accounting mechanism, written into law, on the assumption that destruction would stay rare. Luxury brands turned it into routine. None of this required breaking a single law. It only required the law to have a gap. Burning a coat didn't just protect the brand's exclusivity. In the right jurisdiction, it could hand the company a tax benefit that selling it at a discount never would have. Burberry wasn't hiding any of this. It disclosed the number every single year, buried inside its own annual report, hundreds of pages long. Almost nobody read that far. It took one journalist, going page by page, to find the line and put it in front of the public. Within 48 hours, it was a global scandal. A company had been telling everyone exactly what it was doing, in writing the entire time. Boycott calls spread across social media within hours, and Burberry found itself publicly defending a line item it had been quietly disclosing for years. Not everyone accepted the company's explanation. At Burberry's own shareholder meeting that year, an investor stood up and asked the question most people watching from home were already asking. Why not simply offer the unsold stock to shareholders or the public instead of destroying it? The company didn't have a clean answer. This wasn't a single bad year either. More than a third of that 2018 figure was perfume and beauty products alone. Destroyed after Burberry's licensing agreement with the American fragrance maker Coty came to an end, stock nobody was contracted to sell anymore, and nobody was allowed to discount. The year before, that 28.6 million pounds figure, Burberry destroyed 26.9 million pounds. The year before that, 18.8 million pounds. Added up over 5 years, and Burberry destroyed roughly 90 million pounds of its own product on purpose every year, disclosed the whole time. Burberry says it stopped in 2018 under pressure, and now donates old fabric to social enterprises instead. LVMH, the parent company of Louis Vuitton, says it offers unsold stock to employees through private sales and donates some of it to charity partners. By its own figures, 93% of the group's waste that year was recycled, converted to energy, or reused. Nobody would say what happened to the other 7%. The industry didn't so much abandon the practice as stop discussing it in public. Environmental groups called the Burberry story just the tip of the iceberg, evidence of a problem far bigger than one company's annual report. Regulators decided that wasn't good enough. In 2022, France made it illegal outright, banning companies from destroying unsold non-food goods entirely. By 2026, the EU has extended similar rules across all 27 member states, with clothing and footwear among the first industries required to report exactly what happens to what doesn't sell. This isn't just a disclosure rule either. It sits inside a wider extended producer responsibility framework, meaning brands that don't comply won't just face bad headlines, they'll face financial penalties for the waste they create. None of this required you to do anything wrong. You paid full price because you trusted the price meant something. That trust is exactly what the fire was protecting, not the coat itself. The confidence that what you paid was fair, no matter how many were made or how many didn't sell. It's easy to feel far away from a warehouse fire in a filing nobody reads. But every full-price purchase in this industry is quietly underwriting a system built to make sure some of what's made is never seen at all. What was legal, disclosed, and routine in 2018 is now something regulators across an entire continent are actively trying to stop. The bonfire didn't just burn coats, it lit a question the whole luxury industry still hasn't answered. If the product was never meant to be seen by everyone, what happens to the version nobody was ever allowed to buy? This is the markup.